Hi, my name is Blake Taylor. I'm the author of MeFlow 2, The Fluid Dynamics of Space. The MeFlow refers to magnetic energy flow. Now, had Earth been settled from outer space, then the illusion that the Sun went around the Earth could never have got a look in. Similarly, if there had been no lodestone or magnetite naturally found on Earth, then there'd be no compasses. And when they started to discover electricity, without compasses, the illusion that magnetism circulated around the current could never have started either. Indeed, the correct direction of magnetism would have been discovered directly from the direction of the current. Now, when a current flows along a conductor, it carries with it winds of magnetism, or a wind of magnetism that moves along with it. And obviously it gets weaker the further away it gets from the current. And when two currents flow in the same direction, which I call co-parallel currents, the work done between them is less, the pressure is reduced according to the principles of fluid dynamics, and they're attracted to one another. And when in the reverse happens is when they're traveling in opposite direction, the actual pressure increases and the currents are forced away from, and if they're traveling perpendicular to each other, there's no effect. Now, when you start moving currents around current loops, then if the current is spinning this way, the magnetism also spins in the same direction, and it forms a vortex in the root and around the outside of the loop. And when two currents come together and they have exactly the same vortexes, then they're spinning in the same direction. The vortex increases in between them, the pressure reduces, and they're attracted together. They're doing less work there. And if they're actually coming in the vortexes go in the opposite direction, they're grinding together and they're pushed apart. Now, the more loops you have, the greater the vortex, and so you can make up cylindrical coils with hundreds of loops, and for each loop you increase the vortex by that number. But when you put an soft iron bar inside that current loop, the magnetism increases hundreds, goes through the roof, it increases hundreds of times, sometimes 1,000 times stronger. What's moreover, when the actual bar comes out of the loop, a lot of that magnetism stays in the bar. It becomes permanently magnetized. In the next experiment, you'll see what happens when a current moves between two very strong magnets. And this current starts to flow when it makes contact with the plate at the bottom here, and it's forced out in a direction that's perpendicular to the current, and it's also perpendicular to the line between the magnets. But it is not perpendicular to the magnetism itself, because between the magnets there is a magnetic vortex. And as a conductor enters that vortex, it is both attracted up towards the top part of the vortex and pushed up from the bottom part of the vortex. And similarly, if it goes in the other direction, it is pushed down from the top of the vortex and pulled down by the bottom part of the vortex. And there just could not be a simpler explanation of what happens to a current as it passes through between two strong magnets. But there was lodestone or magnetite, and there were compasses, and magnets had north and south poles, and opposite poles attracted and like poles repelled. And the convention was adopted that magnetism ran from north to south, and the compass was the yardstick that told them what the direction of magnetism, wherever it was flowing, it showed you which way it was flowing. So in the experiment you just saw, the force on that conductor was now perpendicular to the current in the conductor and to the north-south direction of the magnet. And so a sort of a mnemonic was adopted or invented that said the force was the thumb, the finger was the current, and the middle finger was the direction of the north-south. And so all over the world, you see in all the laboratories, schools, universities, you see people doing this ridiculous thing with their fingers. It's a virus. It's spread everywhere. It's been around for 260 years, this virus has been all over the place. And how much easier is it to just say there's a vortex? And if you look at the vortex, if it's moving anti-clockwise, it's a north pole. You're looking at the face of a north pole back here, and if it's moving clockwise, you're looking back here at the face of a south pole. And you'll never have to do that again. You're cured. There's no more confusion. Perpendicularitys made magnetism very confusing. I mean, an event happening this way, another event happening in this direction, causing a third event to happen at right angles to both, was very confusing. And people were asking, what exactly was happening with the ether, because the ether was what all people in the 19th century and up till then believed was conducting electromagnetic phenomenon. You could rub your ruler and you could pick up a piece of lint with electrostatic force, or magnets now could then go and zap up other magnets, you know. And another one in there, which was really quite one of the most interesting, was the Faraday effect, discovered in
1845.
He found that if he shot polarized light through a current conducting coil, the light spun in the direction of the current. In 1887, Michelson and Morley set out to discover what effect the ether had on the speed of light. If the source of the light bulb itself, the light was moving, and the source that was moving was in fact Earth itself. So they measured the speed of light going at various times around over 6 months period, at various times of the day and night, as it orbited around the sun. And sometimes it's going faster when it's around the short part of the ellipse, and then it's going slower on the other side. But they found absolutely no variation in the speed of light. It was constant, no matter how fast or how slow the light source was. And in their disappointment, they concluded one of the biggest non sequiturs ever in the history of science. They said, despite the fact that 3 tests showed that the ether was there, the 4th one, namely their experiment, showed that the speed of light was unaffected, so they said there was no ether. It's a non sequitur. If you can't see it, it's not there. And that was a great relief to the people with perpendicularitis, because now there was no ether. And with no ether, events could go like this and go. Anything was possible, you know, because there was nothing there. But what they had done by doing this was, prior to that, everything was either magnetic fields or electric fields. And by taking the ether out, they gutted the fields. There was nothing the fields worked through. Before, the fields used to work through the ether. But with no ether there, because of this erroneous conclusion, then they had the same word fields, but the fields were empty. So they might as well be called magnetic spells or Merlins. You have a force of 10 Merlins. I mean, it's as stupid as empty fields. You know, there's nothing there. And I'd rather think science was a little bit more scientific than going on for 1.5 centuries with the concept of Merlins. In 1887, Michelson and Morley certainly showed that the speed of light was constant, but they gave us only one conclusion of that experiment, and that was that there was no such thing as the ether. The other conclusion should have been that what is there, if there is anything, it does not affect the speed of light. And to imagine what that material is, that medium is, that supports electrostatic forces, magnetic forces, turns the Faraday effect, turns light, but doesn't affect the speed of light, is what MeFlow is really concerned with, the book MeFlow.